You think technology companies are doing a lousy job protecting your freedom of speech and privacy? Well, you're absolutely right, at least according to the first ever Ranking Digital Rights Corporate Accountability Index. Sam Thielman is a tech reporter for The Guardian and wrote about it for The Guardian, and he joins us now. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here to explain all this. Now, who are these Ranking Digital Rights people, and what do they want?
Well, so these guys are kind of a think tank within the think tank at the Open Technology Institute, which is part of the New America Foundation. It's a little nonprofit in Washington, D.C. that talks about tech policy and how laws should be made about tech companies. But in this case, it's kind of talking about how laws are made by tech companies, which is, I suppose, a little frightening, but also just kind of a fact of modern day existence. So the group is headed by this woman, Rebecca McKinnon, who used to be at CNN, is very smart, and put together a standard using both the United Nations and then the business school Wharton's Corporate Accountability Index.
So, Sam, how do these companies or the big companies do in this? Because let's face it, consumers really don't read the terms of service, and when they're updated, that's even another chance to read them, and people probably don't. I noticed some big standout names on there, and I even saw one major company, major app rather, WhatsApp, have a score of 0 in this. How did everybody do?
Well, they all failed. I mean, some of them. Google, I guess, got a D overall.
That's a passing grade.
Still does. Yeah. They're the only ones who got a passing grade. It's a lot of this just happens because these companies develop these agreements essentially to protect themselves from consumers. But of course, if you protect yourself from consumers too hard, consumers won't use your applications. So because these rules are enforceable both ways, like you can actually, people have successfully sued Facebook under their own terms of service. They have to be written very carefully, but because they also, cross national borders, they have to be written in such a way that they can be carried out in all the countries where the companies do business. In some cases, these tech companies are actually watching out for consumers in ways that governments aren't. They're saying, yes, you can encrypt your stuff in ways that we can never get at it, so no one will be able to get to it with a subpoena. They tell the consumers whether or not they're cooperating with very, very secret orders like the National Security Letter or the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Those are things that governments would probably rather they didn't do, but that they're doing to sort of show willing, because privacy kind of sells these days.
Now, this report was global. They talked about companies in other countries as well, but let's focus on the U.S. for a second. They're covering censorship and privacy, essentially. And censorship and privacy, when the government, the U.S. government, the federal government, is actually violating free speech and privacy, is in fact a right. It's guaranteed by the Constitution, First Amendment for right of free speech, and Fourth Amendment, I guess, is one of the amendments that protects privacy to a certain extent. But when we're talking about Google and Facebook, are these rights really? I mean, is digital rights the correct phrase? I mean, don't users voluntarily give up their privacy and right to free speech when they agree to get these free services?
Well, to an extent, I guess they do, but they also have to. They're also giving something to the companies. I mean, your YouTube, for example, is a platform that is entirely user-generated content, right? It's people with YouTube subscriptions uploading videos. YouTube doesn't make, I mean, they make a little bit they used to make a little bit of stuff, and they're sort of expanding into that. But, the vast majority of the content you see on there is stuff that people just upload themselves. So it needs to be a mutually beneficial deal in order for people to participate in it. In terms of whether or not they're fundamental rights, there is the United Nations has its own charter on human rights. They actually have a charter on digital rights. As technology goes forward, there's a much greater sense that we have to be careful about protecting rights that can be expressed digitally.
Sam, you probably know here in the U.S. we just had the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, get passed through, And I'm wondering, what's the relation of what these rankings are and what these companies are doing to the size of law that we have now?
Well, that's a great question. CISA is, I mean, it has to go back through conference in the House before it's, actually on the books as code. But one of the things that I hope this will do is create a framework around which companies are, I guess, freer and more willing to share the extent to which they're cooperating or not cooperating with governments. This isn't a grade on how often they cooperate. It's a grade on whether or not they tell you they cooperate. It's all about public disclosures. A bunch of these companies have really interesting and detailed public disclosures. Facebook, Microsoft, Google, they all produce, big documents every year that say, okay, this is how many times we told the FBI what was in somebody's email account. Hopefully, those disclosures will become more prevalent and detailed, and hopefully they will also include the program that CISA creates, about which there are no details in the bill. It's totally opaque at this point. So really, we kind of need these companies to come out and do what the government refuses to do.
I'm curious why they didn't include Apple, because, of course, Apple claims to protect users' rights, especially of privacy. Do you know why they didn't include Apple?
Yeah, I do. I mean, so Apple's obviously the largest technology company in the world. They don't provide their email service is less popular than the email services included, and they don't provide connectivity. One of the reasons they're such a large technology company is that they make such great hardware. But this isn't a survey of hardware manufacturers. It's about people who operate on the internet or who provide internet access. I know, I talked to these guys and I said the one I really wanted to see on there was Comcast. And I said, why didn't you guys include them? They just said, we're a small organization. We had time to do either a few companies rigorously or a lot of companies badly, and we chose to do a few companies rigorously. I hope they get more funding. I hope people come forward and say, hey, we think this is a worthy project. You guys should do it again next year and again the year after that, and include more companies every time.
Yeah, I hope you're right on that. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Silicon Valley is terrible, and other tech companies and carriers are terrible at protecting your rights. And Google is a little bit less terrible. So there you go. Sam Thielman is at theguardian.com and on Twitter at Sam Thielman. Sam, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Bye-bye.